There's a generation most people forget to analyze. They're not boomers, they're not millennials, they're not Gen Z. They're the ones who came home to empty houses after school. The ones who learned how to fix problems before Google existed. The ones who watched their parents give decades of loyalty to a company, only to be laid off with a cardboard box and a handshake. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980. They sit between two louder generations, and because they're not flooding social media with explanations about who they are, most people assume they don't have much to say. That assumption is wrong. Gen X developed a specific set of strengths that neither the generation before nor after them cultivated in the same way. Not because they were smarter, not because they were tougher, because they were shaped by a world that doesn't exist anymore. A world without instant answers, without parental hovering, without algorithmic reassurance. A world where you either figured it out or you stayed stuck. If you're Gen X, or you recognize these patterns in yourself, these strengths are probably already running quietly in the background of your life. You just never stopped to name them. Strength 1. Self-reliant. Gen X were the original latchkey kids. They came home to empty houses because both parents were working, or because single-parent households were becoming more common, and there was no alternative. No one hovering over homework, no one monitoring screen time, no one curating their afternoons. They handled it. They made their own snacks, did their own homework, solved their own problems, entertained themselves when boredom hit. And that built something precise: the ability to function independently without needing constant guidance, validation, or rescue. This isn't the same kind of independence later generations developed. Millennials and Gen Z had the internet. They had forums, tutorials, walkthroughs, Reddit threads. If they didn't know something, they could search it in seconds. Gen X had none of that. If they needed information, they found a book, asked someone in person, or tried, failed, and tried again. Trial and error wasn't optional. It was the system. So when something unexpected happens now, they don't immediately crowdsource the solution. They don't freeze waiting for instruction. They handle it. Not because they're hardened, because they've been doing it since they were 8. Strength 2. Self-taught. Gen X grew up analog. Rotary phones, handwritten notes, paper maps. If you wanted to talk to someone, you called their house and spoke to whoever answered. If you wanted to meet up, you made a plan and showed up. There were no text updates, no live location sharing. If someone didn't show, you waited, or you left. Then the world flipped. Personal computers, email, cell phones, the internet, smartphones, cloud storage, remote work, apps for everything. And Gen X learned it all. Not because they were born into it, because they had to. They were already in the workforce when the digital wave hit. If this moved you, comment 9 right now. If it didn't, comment 0. Your voice matters. Take 1 second and share it. Opting out wasn't an option. You couldn't say, "I'm not a tech person," and expect your job to survive. So they learned Word, Excel, email, then smartphones, then video conferencing, then collaboration platforms. They mastered both worlds. They can hold a face-to-face conversation without reaching for their phone, and they can troubleshoot a software issue without panic. They remember phone numbers. They also know keyboard shortcuts. They read a room in person. They read tone in an email. That dual fluency makes them powerful. They don't romanticize the past. They don't fear the future. They learn what needs learning and move on. Strength 3. Detector. Gen X was raised in skepticism. Watergate taught them that leadership could lie. Corporate layoffs taught them that loyalty was not always reciprocated. The cultural mood of the late 20th century, grunge, irony, satire, reinforced one message: question everything. So they developed an internal detector. They can sense performative authenticity. They recognize when someone is selling advice disguised as wisdom. They hear corporate jargon and instinctively filter it. They are not bitter. They are calibrated. They don't chase trends because everyone else is chasing them. They don't follow gurus without asking what the motive is. They wait for proof. In a world where marketing is constant and attention is currency, that skepticism is a quiet advantage. Strength 4. Unfiltered. Gen X learned to handle conflict in real time. There were no subtweets, no ghosting with a click, no vague posts designed to signal distress without confrontation. If you had an issue, you addressed it. In person, on the phone, voice to voice. That built a different muscle. They learned to regulate emotion mid-conversation, to tolerate discomfort without an exit button, to read facial expression, posture, tone shifts. They didn't have scripts. They practiced presence. This doesn't mean they love confrontation. It means they're less likely to avoid it indefinitely. They understand that clarity prevents escalation. In relationships and workplaces, that directness becomes stability, strength. 5. Work to live. Gen X watched their boomer parents sacrifice everything for companies that did not hesitate to restructure them out of existence. They saw 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, deferred dreams, and they made a decision. Not me. Before work-life balance became a corporate slogan, Gen X was already enforcing it quietly. They left the office to attend their kids' games. They took vacations without apologizing. They resisted answering emails at midnight just to signal loyalty. This wasn't laziness. It was pattern recognition. They understood something simple. Your employer can replace you. Your life cannot replace itself. So they built identities outside of work. Hobbies, friendships, creative outlets, families. When layoffs came, when industries shifted, they had something else to stand on. Strength 6. Resourceful. Gen X grew up with limits. Limited television channels. Limited inventory at the video store. If the new release was gone, you picked something else. If your bike broke, you fixed it. If you wanted to record a song, you waited by the radio with your finger on the cassette button. Products weren't endlessly replaceable. Entertainment wasn't infinite. If something failed, you improvised. That environment cultivated resourcefulness. They learned to repair instead of replace, to build with what was available, to create even when tools were imperfect. Garage bands, homemade ramps, DIY culture. Not because it was trendy, because access was limited. That mentality never disappeared. Today, when something breaks, their first instinct isn't buy new. It's, can this be fixed? When budgets shrink or timelines tighten, they don't stall waiting for ideal conditions. They adjust, they adapt, they make it work. In unstable environments, that is gold. Strength 7. Secure. Gen X is the overlooked middle child of generations. Boomers dominated the cultural narrative for decades. Millennials and Gen Z became the focus of marketing strategies and think pieces. Gen X, often ignored. And they're fine with that. They don't require constant validation. They don't need their identity debated in public forums. They don't need applause for doing what they do. They work, raise families, pay bills, build careers, support communities. Without broadcasting it, this isn't disengagement. It's internal security. They learned early that external validation is unreliable. So they built internal metrics. Did I do it well? Does this align with my values? Am I proud of it? That's enough. They are steady, consistent, less reactive to trends or public opinion. They're not chasing visibility. They're pursuing stability. If you are Gen X, or if you recognize these traits in yourself, understand this clearly. You are not jaded. You are not checked out. You did not give up. You adapted. You grew up in a world that didn't hand you answers, didn't celebrate you constantly, didn't promise stability. You became self-reliant. You learned without drama. You developed a detector for noise. You handle conflict directly. You work to live. You build with what's available. You operate without applause. These are not coping mechanisms. They are strengths. And they shape the way you move through a world that rarely stops to notice you, but consistently relies on you. Generation X was never the loudest voice in the room, but they were often the most prepared. They didn't grow up with constant guidance, applause, or instant answers. They built strength through silence, adaptability through necessity, and confidence without needing an audience. And maybe that's why they don't demand recognition now. They don't need it, but understanding them matters. Because beneath the sarcasm and self-sufficiency is a generation that learned to carry weight without complaining, to solve problems without broadcasting them, and to move forward without waiting for permission. If this perspective helped you see Gen X, or even yourself, more clearly, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who grew up with that key around their neck, and subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology shaping our generations.